lot of nuts!
Ah, good morbing, my friends. I'm glad you could make it. My name is Raul Salazar Romando de Ott III, but you may call me Count Chocula. My apologies that your usual curator Sumeto was unable to greet you today. He had an unfortunate incident messing around with some dark alchemy, and now the entire museum has been transformed into a vampire coven. And also his brother's been fused with a suit of armor or something. I've warned the curators for years to be wary of vampire spies infiltrating the museum. But Master Sumeto has an affinity for women in black lipstick and nipple piercings, so perhaps it was only a matter of time. Nevertheless, we have managed to open our newest exhibit, and I'm sure you're very excited to see it. I assume you're familiar with the cinematic masterpiece Morbius, though I pray to Lucifer that you didn't actually sit down and watch the film. I believe you're more familiar with the memes that have been going around on the internet, and I assure you this newest exhibit is chock full of them. So please keep your fangs sharp and leave your wooden stakes in the mezzanine as we move into the newest art gallery. After all, it's Morbin time. The best part of Morbius is when he said, "It's Morbin time," and then morbed all over those guys. It seems like an innocent enough tweet. It seems like a simple shitpost. And yet it wouldn't be an exhibit in this meme museum if it didn't have some depth to it. There are, after all, levels to this, like an onion or a piece of garlic. Why would I use that example? I'm a vampire. In order to appreciate the level of satire that comes with this simple tweet, you must first appreciate the burning hatred that certain moviegoers have for Marvel films, of which Morbius is one. Cinemaphiles and movie molesters generally look down on superhero genre films because of their formulaic, one-dimensional plotline and execution. There are no crazy stories or twists and turns that nobody sees coming, and while the general populace may find a tremendous amount of entertainment in them, more seasoned cinema goers find themselves upset at the stark comedic relief and obvious plot lines that come with such films. The Hulk handing a couple of tacos to another individual in the middle of a war for all of humanity. Somebody destroying half the planet and then a superhero going, "Well, that just happened," seems to be wearing heavy on people who have now watched 8 films in a row to understand the 9th one. And so this tweet is more than just a simple shitpost. This tweet is a call out of Hollywood's laziness, of the story writing that becomes so familiar that it becomes boring. It's almost expected that in a Hollywood movie such as this, the main character named Morbius might have some sort of Final Fantasy limit break known as Morbin time, and then morbs all over everybody. And then you sit through 6 minutes of credits just to see him eat a shawarma at the end of it for some reason. It may seem like a harsh analysis of one of the most successful cinematic franchises of all time, but you'll have to trust my 3,000 years of experience. I know what I'm talking about. If this tweet didn't have dialogue that was so predictable, it wouldn't have resulted in thousands of moviegoers watching the film and then being disappointed that the main character never says it's Morbin time, despite how believable this tweet made it seem to be. Vampire? More like vamp liar. This artifact was recovered in the ancient year of 2019. It is a green text, a hieroglyphic text describing the time that Anon was excited to see the film Kangaroo Jack, a film about a talking, rapping, animated kangaroo as he was led to believe through all of the promotional footage. Him and his brother would find themselves rapping kangaroo freestyles to each other in anticipation of what would surely be a fantastic film that would deliver on this premise. So excited, in fact, he enters the cinema dressed in a kangaroo costume, exuberated at the thought of seeing this animated, talking, rapping kangaroo, until he comes to the dark realization halfway through the film that this movie contains very little rapping, talking kangaroo, despite being named Kangaroo Jack. He is so dismayed by this fact that his brain begins to huff on morbium. This is what copium is called now. And he begins to believe that the kangaroo that he's seeing in front of him, standing doing very little, is in fact talking and rapping as he was so inclined to believe that he was. And him and his brother left the movie theater feeling a sense of pride and happiness that they received what they were promised. But in reality, this was nothing more than Stockholm Syndrome, a coping mechanism because of how poorly they were treated with the promise of this film. Many years later, they decided to purchase the film on DVD, and without the sense of nostalgia and childhood whimsy to help them along through enjoying the film, they began to shed tears of pain and sorrow at the realization that Kangaroo Jack was not a good movie. It was Morbius. Is it possible that the meme itself caused the movie to become somewhat watchable? Everybody knew that yet another superhero movie from Marvel was going to contain the same old formulaic plot, slowly leading into a bigger movie. Were you going to see the movie anyways, or was it worth ironically watching the film simply to see the hilarity and self-absorption in a film using a line such as "It's Morbin time"? Is morb simply a funny enough word to get you to spend $13 on a movie ticket? It's like wumbo, a noun and a verb. You can morb here, you can morb there. Green eggs and morb. Morbidly obese, is that one? That's one, right? Knowing everything we know now, the expectations set by the film, or more so the memers that watched it and wanted to give somebody else something to look forward to, even if it wasn't real, we can now appreciate the following two images of, I think this is Amy from Sonic, I don't know. But pay attention to the comedy and drama intertwined in these two simple frames. The first one, filled with optimism and joy. Are you ready to watch the Morbius premiere? As she stands up straight, excited to go see the film with you, her voluptuous curvature accenting the Morbius t-shirt that she's wearing, only to then be dunked on by the sad reality of the second panel. She's now in the fetal position, crouched up, defending her vital organs, upset at the lack of morbin time provided by this film. You can hardly see the t-shirt anymore, much like you hardly ever want to watch this film again. Her disappointment is nearly immeasurable, though Rotten Tomatoes has found a number to associate with the film just fine. It's like a roller coaster that goes up, and as you get to the peak, they let you off and you have to walk back down for some reason. Truly encapsulating the internet's perceived hilarity of such a film, and then the letdown, the sad, crushing reality that it is in fact not morbing time. Naturally, this phenomenon begs the question that philosophers have been pondering for thousands of years. Why? Not why make the Morbius movie, that's a question we'll never have the answer to. But why come up with morbin time? Surely the first individual to go and watch the film and then decide that he doesn't enjoy it would find himself raving about how much he enjoyed not having to watch the film again, or bitching about how bad the film was and then nobody should watch it. Rather, an individual decided to take the time to say that they enjoyed it so much that they made up a piece of dialogue, an absolutely absurd, self-indulgent catchphrase that doesn't exist in the movie, simply to give himself something to show some positive feedback online? That doesn't seem like Twitter at all. I think back to a time when I hadn't seen the final season of Game of Thrones, and I wondered how they were going to come back and defeat the Ice King and take over King's Landing. And a part of me thought, what if Ned Stark came back from the dead? And immediately I figured, that's ridiculous, they would never do anything that stupid. And then after watching the final season of Game of Thrones, I found myself thinking, it would have been 1000% better if they brought Ned Stark back from the grave somehow and then he ruled over King's Landing. That would have been a better ending than what they actually went with. And I'm beginning to believe that a similar level of copium is arising in the Morbius fandom, if you can even call it a fandom. Perhaps everybody wants to collectively believe that he said, "It's morbin time," and then morbed all over those guys. Because the reality that none of that happens and the film was awful is a bit too bitter of a pill to swallow. Or morballo, if we're still doing Morbius puns. With Morbius introducing morb and morb words into the English lexicon, making less and less sense as time goes on, I've noticed a reoccurring theme in some of the artworks that have been posted in the modern era. It appears as though all the males seem to enjoy the movie, or at the very least, are excited by the idea of morbing time and Morbius in general, whereas it is traditionally the more feminine and female characters that are upset at how bad the movie is, or thoroughly dismayed at the lack of morbing time in these films, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Think back for a moment. What was the last big vampire movie that anybody was talking about? That's right, Twilight. The last shitty series of vampire films that had every boyfriend dragged to the films to watch this terrible vampire adaptation by their girlfriends has now reached a sort of equilibrium with the release of the movie Morbius, where now we, the fellas, can drag our female counterparts to watch an equally shitty vampire film. Nature has taken order and equality has been restored, as all of us males had to be dragged to watch Twilight, which could be described as nothing more than absolute bullshit. Perhaps now it's our time to introduce our female counterparts to some more BS. A special shout out to the Count and Countesses over on the Patreon for supporting this art gallery. Because of you, I've been able to purchase some of the finest memes for this exhibit. Remember to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed the movie Morbius. And if you didn't enjoy the movie Morbius, well then maybe you should consider getting more bitches. I'll catch you guys on next week's art exhibit. Spisu.